let's put it this way. If you want to put this in the frame of the 60s were really a 10-year period of time between 65 and 75.
65 and 70.
Sure. There was a 60s that went from 65 to 70, and then there were 60s that went from 70 to 75.
Yeah. We left Hollywood
in 69.
68.
68. Right. So you were
last month of 68.
Right. So you were fortunate to have been in the entire 60s. Yeah. But people like me who picked up the second half, 70 to 75, who lived in Hollywood, we found one of the attractive parts of living in Hollywood were the economies of scale. As I mentioned, I could rent a one-bedroom place in the Hollywood Hills for $100 a month.
Right.
Talk about the rents and the economy, the costs of food in the early 60s, 65.
Well, because I had done these movies, because I was, had tails on these bands and had my own band, I expected to have a better life. Right. But in living at the log cabin, for whatever I lived there for, I met a guy that was a black guy, and he was going to UCLA, and he was a business student, and his friends were people like Abdul-Jabbar, who wasn't Abdul-Jabbar yet. He was Lou Alcindor, and he was kind of an entrepreneur. So he was a seller of dope.
Right.
Well, I lived with him, and he said, I'll sponsor you. He's the one that ran the dances. Because he rented the upper part of the log cabin. So he had 2 rooms upstairs and one downstairs, and then he had this major hall, and then he had the kitchen and stuff like that. So he ran that thing, and I helped him get the bands, you see. Gave my brother a chance to make some money and so forth. Anyway, so I lived with him as he's my sponsor. Now, it came to fruition that Gail Zappa needed a place to live. She's coming back from New York City with Frank. I told her to go to see Fonya Pearson about her house, and she had made an agreement with her about moving into the chateau, but it was too small. So one day she's driving down the street looking in Laurel Canyon in Lookout Mountain for a house to live. She pulls up to the red light there, and all of a sudden she hears me say, "Yeah, this is the place. Come on over here. You can rent this." So she's in a convertible. She drives in, and I said, I gave her the information, and within a few weeks, she was living there with Frank.
What was the rent?
It was very minimal, probably $300 or $400 or $500, not very much, and she got the whole house.
Right, right. And that was kind of the thing. So Edie, now how did you make? I know that you were on SSI, but did you work at all?
I didn't get SSI yet.
I thought you got it in '68. No, that's right. You didn't get it till '68 or '69. So how did you get money during this period?
That's what I'm trying to say. I had no sponsor.
Right.
I had a movie out called You Are What You Eat.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't attending us very much. It was Peter, Paul, and Mary's movie, and so I'm with this guy, and he decides that he's going to rent a place, and we rented a place on Fairfax and Sunset.
Okay.
It's a 2-story house. Applebaum moved in there with his girlfriend. Bob Roberts moved in there, and a woman by the name of not Dara, but something like that, and she had a baby. And then he invited one of his friends to come, who was his mule, his coke mule, to come up and live with him. And he was also involved with a guy It was from Harvard. So they were selling cocaine. So we had a house meeting. And I said, I don't care about your cocaine. Just keep it out of this house. If you keep it out of the house, we have no problems. Well, he didn't do that.
And that's when you got busted.
That's why I got busted.
All right. What about let me see, I have some other things.
But the money for me, I had no money.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to know.
I was stealing out of the supermarket until some guys came to me one day, one of the guys, and said, listen, you're being observed and they know you took something out of this place. So I said, just a second, I forgot something. I went back, put the stuff back on the shelf, and bought whatever I could and left. But I didn't have any money.
So, and at this point, how was Vito getting money?
Vito was still doing his classes, but they were getting less, and the police were coming and waiting after at this when the classes were over. Any of those yentas that were coming, or the people that were coming from different places, the police would stop them,
Harassment,
and harass them, and that means they weren't going to come back.
Right. And they did that purposely.
So his business was going down. He was getting less revenue and he had to pay the rent.
And Sue was still selling clothes with not as many.
And then when I got busted like that, and the police kept it up, and then one day she put a garment outside of there was a baby's garment, and it was in the wind, you know, it was a come into the shop, and because she made baby clothes and she made these free clothes, it was slashed with a razor blade. So they knew they had just lost Godot on Christmas, and they decided he better get out of there.
What happened with the incident of Godot? You need to go on record. Were you there?
I was there.
Please tell the story.
The story is this: we were going to our photographer Ray Leong summoned us for a picture. So I said, okay, we'll do it on the roof, because we had done a roof one before and it was successful. So we were gathering to go there. Now you had to go up 2 flights of stairs to the roof. Sue came up beforehand. She had 2 little boys with her. Boys were about teenage, 11, 12, 13. And she had Godot, and Godot was running around the roof. She's a very energetic child. And she went to the far end where Beverly Boulevard is, and there's a big, double sign up there. Then there's, as she's walking, I didn't see the incident. All I know is what happened. I heard, hey, blah, 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 something happened to him, blah, blah, blah. That he had fallen through the skylight. Now, she was there with them, but the boys had a hold of him. Now, they didn't know, they didn't understand that he couldn't go on that piece of glass. It was a piece of glass that had wire meshing in it. So he walked on there, and it was, the sun had disintegrated, and he fell through, and he went to the next floor, and he hit his head. So they rushed him, ambulance came, he rushed him to the Hollywood emergency. They sent him to Children's Hospital. We all followed in cars. There were about 15 of us there. I don't know if the GTOs were there or not, but a lot of people were there in the hospital, and Vito was crying, about his son and stuff like that, and but the doctor told him, I think in front of us, that the son was going to be okay, but we need to keep him here overnight because we need to give him observation. You can go home, Vito. Now, Vito didn't want to go home, but we, as a crowd, said, because he was so emotional about it, okay, everything's going to be okay. Come with us. We'll go home. I wasn't there when he got the phone call that his son was dying, and he got there and I think he died. Now, Vito says that the procedure of a child or anybody that's had a head injury is to put them on their side. They had him on his back, so he choked to death. And he proved in a law case maybe 10 years after that, that's what happened.
You mean he sued them?
He's actually sued the doctors, I think.
And he won?
No, he didn't win. They offered him $12,000 and he refused it. So he lost. And but he proved to himself, because he had medical evidence, and there was a doctor on his side, that they wouldn't let, they only let him do say certain things about what he thought about the case and stuff. And so he lost, but he also found out that they had done that, because it came out that they were supposed to have him on his side, not on his back.
So at least he got closure on that part of it, to some extent.
Yeah. But they also, you have to understand that they the accusation was against Sue for not holding on to him.
Well, so was that part of the part? Did they think that there may be legal action brought against them, and is that one of the reasons they decided to split?
Yeah, and some of those books, they say things, about the sexuality of Godot and the sexuality of other characters that had come into Vito's and stuff like that.
Well, this guy talks about passing the kids around for kisses and things of that nature.
Yeah, well, really?
Yeah.
Well,
you'll have to read it.
Godot was a loving person, and I don't think it doesn't have anything to do with a sex thing with Godot. Godot was just one of those special kind of young people, a young boy that was so far ahead of himself. His name is God. He was actually was like God. He painted. Vito saved his paintings, and when he died, he had a wake, and he got this warehouse, and he put up all his paintings. He sold every one of the paintings, because the way that boy manipulated a painting was just like we were artists in his studio. There's something else about it. Oh yeah, he was a drummer. And all the drummers would come and give him lessons about how to do it. Now, when he would go and do his daily drum thing, he was just like a regular drummer. He could have been in a band. And so, how is the
battery?
What's that?
Battery.
We have 17 minutes left, I believe.
Okay.
You've got an alarm ringing, I think.
Oh yeah, we got to touch this thing.
All right, well, good call. So,
Fred C. Dobbs was a very small place. If you equivocate it, it might have been like it was an intellectual place. You got to remember who Fred C. Dobbs was. It was a movie by John Huston, and that was a really crazy story about the desert and guys finding gold. So the connotation was really intellectual to go there.
It was from, wasn't it from Treasure of the Sierra Madre?
Yeah.
And that was by B. Traven, whose name nobody ever knows, who went into exile in Mexico. But yeah, a great book and a great film about greed once they get the gold.
Yeah. Yeah, it was one of the best movies they ever made.
Sure it was. What a fantastic film.
Yeah. John Huston was the director and was an actor in it.
His father, Bogart was the actor in it too.
Yeah, his father was the main character of the old process.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
What about
petroleum reserve, which he can use
I knew
right now
it was
to
gonna
beat down the prices of oil. The House has turned down the bill anyway. The price of oil today and
okay, talk about Beetle Bob a little bit. Tell people who Beetle Bob was.
Beetle Bob was a young guy that came to Vito's and wanted to paint in Vito's basement.
How old was he?
17 years old. And he had a thing about, you know, he was a teenager, so he had a far out look. He was still going to high school. And he had a page boy. He looked like, one of the rock stars maybe 5 years before.
Yeah, right.
So
I know who you know. What
so he was a surrealist painter, and he was very successful. John Denver, no, not John Denver, but one of the monkeys, I think. Was somebody bought a lot of his paintings. It wasn't John Denver. It was anyway. He was a successful guy, and his father at one time, his father was a manufacturer of clothes. Schmata. So it kind of went with Sue the way she was, but he sold that straight stuff. He had, Chicanos working for him in mass.
Making pants like
yeah.
this.
Bob Roberts at one time took a lot of his clothes, his father's clothes, and went out to the flea markets and would sell it at the flea market. Anyway, he was a freak. And he had a beautiful young woman by the name of Karen, who was a pretty good dancer, and they were my mainstay to go, one of my mainstays to go on the tour with the Birds. So his father came to me once and he said, "What am I going to do with my son? He's, and he gave me a couple of Jewish words about, how he wasn't very attentive to business and stuff like that." So I said, "Listen, your son is a fine artist. Back him as you can, because he has what it takes to be a really good artist and famous." And in his progression, he painted for years, and then became a tattoo artist on Hollywood Boulevard. And he started to drink a lot. And then they put him, that company put him somewhere like in Long Beach or something like that. So he had to drive his car out there, and he would be drunk, and they caught him a couple of times, being drunk, and his car would be on the freeway sitting there. Anyway, his father backed him. His progression was to become a tattoo artist, and what else? I helped him open up his studio in Hollywood.
What street?
It was at Vine and Melrose.
Okay.
Before the Melrose action.
Oh yeah.
Melrose
didn't take off till the 90s, did it?
Yeah. This was in the 80s.
Right. No, Melrose was all where I used to walk. It was all Jewish. It was just neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
To cap this part of this epic off is, what would you say that the end of the What was the end of the freak movement?
We should probably stop because we've got 1 minute left on the battery.
Okay,
Okay.
Okay.
we're on.
Yep.
Okay, so getting back to the timeline that we were on, when I think the last time we left off was Vito had come back from the islands, and you had come back from that horrific cocaine episode in Canada and so forth and so on, and then you both of you started to gravitate up north. Initially, Vito went up to Sausalito, if I'm correct.
Vito was looking for a place to live. He had a friend, a young woman that was a fine artist. Her name was Margot, or wait a minute. I can't quite. Anyway, we knew her from Hollywood. She went around with us in the early part of Vito's situation when we went to, before anybody else, we went to the black community and picketed.
What year was that?
This was before the Watts riots,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Marco, her name was Marco. That was her name. I knew her in North Beach later on, and I knew that Vito was going to zero in on Marco. Marco had her own place in Sausalito, so Vito decided to rent a house and a store. In other words, he was going to have two.
So he had a little cash.
Okay. When he sold everything in Hollywood, I think he came out with about $12,000.
Which was a lot of money back then.
Yeah. So he went to Haiti first. He went to the Isle of Jamaica, and then Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
All three, he knew he couldn't make it. He had Groovy with him.
Mm-hmm.
So when he was in Sausalito, he decided to go to a dance in what's the name of that? Fillmore East.
Yes.
Now Fillmore East was now moved from Geary Street over to Market and Van Ness upstairs. Okay, so he was there and he ran into a young guy who says to him, "My name is Robert Amazzotti, and I'm a student at Sonoma College
Right.
in Cotati."
Morehouse.
Yeah. He says, if I was going to move somewhere, I would move to Cotati, because there's nothing there, and you'll be starting a new life there.
Now this must have been difficult though, coming from a city where you jump into the cars with 15 people and you go to 30 clubs and you go down to Canners and you're active and you're walking the streets,
Yeah.
to come to a place where there's a couple of cows and goats.
Right.
Well, that transition must have been difficult
It was for her.
for
Because
Sue.
you got to remember that she was so idolized as a designer.
Right.
She was way ahead of everybody. The May Company would come and buy a garment for her and then reproduce it. So she was lonesome for her crowd. Also, you got to remember she went to Fairfax High School, and all her friends,
Right.
you know,
Now, when they move, it's just her and Vito, husband and wife with the kids. Right?
and Groovy.
And Groovy with the kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so he then, I think we did this on the tape before. So then he goes over and he buys that house. He pays cash for that house, right? With the savings that he had gotten from the sales of some of his.
Jack Nicholson and
Right.
so forth.
And so they take up residence there. But how does Sue then? What does Sue start doing with herself now that she's
Sue
lonely?
is still sewing, but not as much. Mostly she's having kids.
Mostly having kids.
Uh,
When does the free store start coming about as an
well,
idea?
Okay, the free store starts coming
I need years.
in about 2 years.
72.
Yeah. Now, Free Store was really a product of Vito and what was the guy's name? He's a Finnish,
Glenn Sacco.
Glenn Sacco. They were also reading somebody that was a South American poet that was talking about street theater and stuff like that. So Vito says, I'm on the verge of going back to Hollywood.
Okay, 1 minute now before you go on. Because at this time we had the San Francisco Mime Troupe,
Yeah.
which was, Vito must have been aware of them as well.
Well, we're not so aware of them because it's not a question of us going to see the mime troupe or know about it. I think they did come up here at one time.
We brought them up, I
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah. So they just said, let's try to do some theater in the back of Last Great Hiding Place.
Okay, I remember where they had the movie theater back
Yeah,
there. And
yeah.
Roger had that
So we
place.
did it, and they had so much fun. I didn't get in the first one, but the second one I said I could, because I'm the observer.
Right.
I get to observe what they did, and it was so
What did they do?
cantankerous.
What did they do?
Well, they were all over themselves, and it, it was manipulation of. Mostly it was Applebaum doing some stuff, and in and out, going in and out of the stage, and falling all over each other and stuff like that.
So there was Applebaum, Glenn, and Vito.
Yeah, and a lot of women.
What women?
I don't think Laurie Allen was in there yet, nor.
Well, how did these women know about this?
It was just general knowledge, wanting something to do. You got to remember that, as you say, Cotati is a very not happening place.
Right.
But they do have an inn where they bring bands in, and you can go over there and dance. So that's a big plus for all of us.
Right.
Plus, they have these bars that are getting them drunk too.
14 bars in a 1 mile radius.
Yes,
in Cotati.
that's Cotati.
Right.
So
In the beginning, Last Great Hiding
Yeah.
Place.
yeah,
Jerome's wasn't even there at that time.
Not yet.
Just in the beginning, Last Great Hiding Place did offer the venues. Neil Young would come up and
Yeah.
play.
Yeah.
Charlie Musselwhite, a lot
Everybody.
of good blues. Okay, so, but Vito didn't have the troupe of girls initially, did he?
the girls just came because they wanted to do theater.
Okay. And
Uh,
you had moved up because you had been in San Francisco, right?
I was living in San Francisco because I was interested in finding out what Vito was doing. So I visited him, but I was living in North Beach,
Mhm.
and that's where they gave me ATD.
Right.
And I had a social worker that really liked me, and she saw that I was an offbeat person. So she had a boss that was a poet, so they, talked to each other. So she got me better lodgings, and I got to be friends with her, and then I moved up to Cotati.
Now, when
First day of 70.
And the first day of 70. Okay, so, but I had interrupted you. So you were saying that you were observing in the audience, and Glenn and Vito were doing this thing in the back of the Last Great Hiding Place.
Yeah.
Okay, so then how did it proceed from there?
It proceeded because Vito said, let's try to get an audience. We couldn't get an audience, so we would go on the street, and he would play his accordion, and they'd travel the downtown street of Cotati and tell people where we were playing, and then they'd bring them in instantly. You see? So we'd have an audience. And some of those women would have friends, and they would come too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But then they started living with Vito, didn't they? In other words, how did Sue take all this as Vito began to put
here's
together?
Sue. She wants this. She wants something special with herself in that thing, and she never could catch up with it. Also, she has a baby on her hands, and I think it's Freakus. I'm not sure, but I think it's Freakus.
But she had no problems with Vito seeing other women, or
No, up till then, she was a free range woman. When she went to dance down at the inn, she would find boyfriends and bring them home. And he never bothered her about that. If she wanted to pull a guy off somewhere. So the things started getting bigger and bigger, and she didn't have a prominent thing to do in the show.
she did the clothes for the show, though, didn't she?
No,
She didn't.
no, that was come catch can. Everybody tried to figure out what they were going to be in the show, and the woman really was wearing net stockings. It looked like something out of the 1990s, you know, what was that movement, or the French, you know, kicking.
Yeah. The Bergère.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it developed into that, and that was the kind of the uniform of the woman. Plus, Vito came up with an idea of painting your face from the Nuba of Africa. He acquired some books on the Nuba, who was the most famous people in near Darfur, near what's the country?
Sudan.
Sudan, and they were not isolated, but they were way in the desert, and they lived in tremendous heat, and they lived in caves that they would dig out for themselves. But the male would paint his face every day, or paint his body every day. So he had pictures of it, showed it to us, and some of those women would copy it. My face was always a star of some kind, either black, white, red, or whatever I felt like for the day. And I also...
And a derby hat.
No, that was the beginning.
Oh.
That was the beginning of it. I painted myself in stripes, a flag. And then something happened in front of the San Francisco, where the supervisors are.
Down at City Hall?
Yeah. And where some drunken Indians came up and started assaulting me. And when we left that situation, Vito said, the best thing you could do is change that. Get another costume, because you're being assaulted by the Indians, and there's a reason. They don't like the flag that you're... so I did. I went home and changed it so that the stripes were yellow and red and black, and you know, the stars were not all white stars.
Right. So the Free Store then really took off in 1970, right?
Took off in 72.
72.
72, because we were there a couple of years.
And then when I met you guys was 2 years later in 74.
74.
But by that time you were doing almost weekly park things.
See, he had built the bandstand
and the platform
and
the tables on the outside, right?
Yeah. Buju did some of those. He was part of the cast.
Right.
And his girlfriends, Kathleen was my girlfriend, and went to him, and I think they got married.
Right.
And then there was Bobby.
Right. Whatever happened to Bobby?
I saw her, you know, flea market or somewhere like that.
Recently?
No, 2-3 years ago.
She looks fine?
She looked fine.
She was friendly?
Yeah. Yeah, she's very friendly to me.
So Bobby was there, Glenn was there, Yvonne was there at the time?
Yvonne, yeah.
And Mary America, Boujou. Peggy wasn't there right then, was
Peggy
she?
was there.
And the
Peggy
initial-
was there from the beginning.
From the beginning. And then, so by 74, then the bandstand was put in, and you guys were doing weekly things
Well,
with
the bandstand was there earlier than that. The bandstand was there in 71.
Oh, was it?
Because the park was just a field with some nice trees.
Yes.
And tumbleweeds were in there.
Really?
And they hadn't even done the grass or anything. So initially, Vito went over the top of the city council's head because they didn't give them an approval for him, but he just started building it, and he got people that had old chicken coops to give him the wood to build the bandstand. And he was doing his house with the same stuff, same tongue and groove flooring from chicken coops. So that's what he built the bandstand.
Where did you live when you first came up?
I lived with him.
You did. He had that little place in the back at that time?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I didn't stay there very long. I got a place behind the 8 Ball.
Right, I remember that. I remember walking by and seeing you stooping in front of the window.
Really?
Yeah. And then so you lived behind the 8 Ball, and then when you never went back and lived with Vito again, did you?
Maybe, when I would come from Hollywood, when I went to Hollywood, I would come back and I would stay there.
Stay there, but you never really
No, I never lived there again. No.
And but were there in the group, the girlfriends had boyfriends and so forth, but was it pretty incestuous amongst the people?
Well, in any theater company, there's always, especially people that are not married, you would get together with somebody because they would have outside boyfriends. What do they call them? Stage door Johnnies. That's how Peggy met George DiCaprio.
Right.
He was a stage door Johnny, but he was also into his affiliation was comic books with the guy that was photographing us. And George was, had that kind of a thing going, and met through the photographer, our photographer, and he would come to the shows, and especially at Union Square. So him and Peggy started to get a mesh, but at the same time, Vito's her boyfriend too, and I am too. So she was well taken care of as far as a woman. And she was married at the time, and she was married to a guy that was, he was an artist, but he was also a racist dude. He was known to take a gun and go to the Watts riots and shoot black people. That's what, I don't know that for
You
sure,
heard this.
but I heard that.
Well, Free Store then began to get popular in Cotati, and then more people started to move up from L.A., didn't they? When did that migration happen?
That started in the 70s, and most of the thing was that you have a college that turned into a university and got bigger and bigger and bigger. It's so big today that it's not even worth going to.
Oh, I know, I understand. But at that time, it only had 5,000 students.
Yeah.
And it was known for its parapsychology department, not for its business school.
Yes, right.
As you know, we started the Marxist lecture series on campus
Yes.
from 74 to 78, and brought Angela Davis and Elaine Brown and all these people out there. Whatever happened to the sculpture, I've seen it online, of the Angela Davis head that he made for Angela Davis? What happened to that?
Well, if you look on his house, there's one there or two, but it wasn't as prominent as that statue.
Yeah, what was happening to the one he made for?
So he made it, and then there was you may have brought her there.
We brought her.
And then Vito came there with the statue and gave it to her.
So she still possesses it?
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, I would think so. I would think so. I do remember the presentation. It was in the gym What was your contact? I know Vito taught at the college when it was Morehouse and things like that. But what was you folks' contact with the college?
Well, that was it, though. See, they started to give him a job, and something came up about him being a teacher. All the teachers wanted him.
Right.
En masse, they
Right.
all wanted him. But something came up where he couldn't be a paid teacher.
Probably because of the felonies. The record.
Maybe.
He could have been.
Yeah. So what they did is they gave him, because his best friend ran Ives, the theater
Who
arts.
was that at the time?
I don't remember, but he died about the same time Vito died.
Oh, really?
But anyway, he gave him an experimental class if he wanted it. So he had a dance class. That's how we got Freestore together. If you didn't join the class and go with Vito's dance classes, then you couldn't be a participant.
Oh, I see. But if you participated in the class, then you could participate in the.
Yeah, because he wanted to see you. You go into a class like that, and there was total mirrors, and he weren't going to lie to him.
Right, right.
About your logistics.
What was there a lot of rehearsal involved in the?
Yeah, we rehearsed. I think it was up to 3 times a week. We went there for a while, and once we got it's solid about what to do, we would do a rehearsal to change. Okay, you're going to do this week, and next week you're going to. We'll see what you're going to do.
And who did a lot of the writing for it?
Applebaum.
Applebaum did a lot of the writing.
Applebaum was brilliant in writing and brilliant in his portrayals, but he was quirky in the way he couldn't get along with Vito. They would clash about, because you got to remember there can only be one director.
Right.
So Applebaum kind of wanted to be the director, and Vito wasn't going to stand for that.
Was there a falling out between Vito and Applebaum?
Well, I would say never, not really, because Sue and also his Loretta Mary were his girlfriends. So, but see, you got to remember
Was
that
whose girlfriend?
Applebaum would screw those women.
What? Vito Sue.
Maybe Sue, but also Loretta.
Right.
Was a very prominent person with him.
But they never had an actual falling out.
No, he just would keep him. Okay, Ricky, you can bring this stuff in here, but he wanted to see. He wanted to be the major actor in there, but he. For some reason, he was too whatever.
Well, I remember I was working for K-Sun radio station at the college in 1974 as a college radio station, and one of the first people I interviewed was Applebaum. He had just gotten out of prison.
Yeah.
It was just 1974.
Yeah.
He had platform shoes from the glam era,
Yeah.
about this long and shit.
Yeah.
And he came in and he was quirky and jittery.
Yeah.
But this is before he.
There was a young woman that he went with. She couldn't make Freestore. She was too frail. Linda. She was from Hanford.
I remember.
And they lived.
They had kids together. Adam was one of their
Yeah.
kids.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Anyway, no.
Yes. She had a kid.
No. Adam is the girl's. The girl is Brown, whatever her name is, that used to live behind the 8.
Pam Brown?
Pam Brown. That's Adam's story.
Oh, really?
That's Adam Blue.
Right.
Okay. I don't think she could have a baby with him.
Oh, okay.
They were junkies together.
Oh.
Heroin.
Right.
And I wrote her father a letter, and I said, you come and get your daughter, because if you don't, your daughter's going to die. She's going to overdose, no doubt about it. So he came and picked her out of there and took her home. And that's when they lived right behind the bandstand in those old buildings.
Right, the bungalows back there.
Yeah. So.
But Vito had always, you guys had always known that Applebaum was a heroin addict, right?
Well, you got to remember that he took Vito's place in Hollywood.
Right.
He took his lodgings.
Right. Started renting them out like he always did.
Yeah, whatever he did, there was always a question. I have heard that Applebaum had something to do with Manson. That he had invited Manson, or Manson had visited him at that, looking for Vito.
Okay.
I don't know if Manson ever came into Vito. I have stories about my wife being a friend of Sharon Tate. My wife was Basia Janisowski, who stayed with them because she was Polish and they could speak Polish together.
She stayed with, what's his name? Wojciech Frykowski. Wojciech Frykowski was one of the people that were killed that was staying at the Shade's house.
Yes.
He was Polish.
Yeah, but also so was Polanski.
Polanski was Polish as
and
well.
so was Sharon.
Oh, I didn't know.
They could speak. They could.
Okay.
She had a very My wife's this very strong intellectual person.
So she stayed up at the Sharon Tate house?
She would stay with them, and as I saw the movie or something about what had happened there, the portrayal of the place was serene. That they opened the doors for people to walk in there.
Exactly.
That's why they got killed.
Right.
They had no guards, nobody to ward them off.
Right. But you had heard that Ricky had been involved with them?
With Manson.
What about
now? Let me say something about. These are all I don't know.
I understand.
They said also that he killed Ricky Applebaum killed somebody on the freeway, on one of the freeways with his car. Probably was loaded. I don't know for the.
Right. I understand.
But I knew that he was a famous character. He got out of it. I understand because of his father and his mother got him out of it.
Got Ricky out of it.
Ricky out of it.
Well, who was Bobby Beausoleil?
Robert Beausoleil was Bummer Bob.
Right.
Now, Bummer Bob, when Wildman Fisher was around in front of this little club, that's where love was consummated. They had another name. Barry McGuire had a band that had the same name. So
called the Grassroots.
Yeah. Okay. So they had to find another name. So Cherry Wood, who's one of the singers on the band on the record Freakout, and was also one of the Cherry Sisters. There were 4 Cherry Sisters. I was one. Cherry, her girlfriend, can't remember her name right now, and Valerie Silvis, who was a writer. Her mother had her own, gave her a couple of pages in her entertaining newspaper in Orange, California. She was the other one. I went with her to visit the mothers in Hawaii, and she also was one of the craziest dancers we had because she jumped up and down and just did her hands and had this crazy smile on her face forever. That was Valerie Silvis.
So, but where did you hear these stories of Applebaum and Manson?
As we're living in Cotati, and those things filter back.
And what about Bummer Bob? He was a band member. Bummer Bob for Love, wasn't he?
Was a guy that hung around with a dog. His favorite thing was him and his dog.
Okay.
So he was a rhythm guitar player, and he was trying to get a job with Love before it was Love.
Right.
And he came to audition, but at the same time, Brian McLean wanted to get into the band.
Right.
Brian McLean at that time was my roommate. He lived with me above Vito's.
Okay.
and he's auditioning for the band, and because of our dancers were there, they picked Brian.
Mm-hmm.
Bummer Bob was a bummer.
Where'd he come from?
I don't know. He's a street guy. I don't know too much about him. He would be at Cantor's.